Many saying that today, 30 years after he was sentenced, Donald Harvey was judged.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're taking a look at the serial killers who were brought to justice by murder in prison.
This story of Pickton is really a story of egregious police errors and public indifference.
Thor Nis Christiansen.
Thor Christiansen terrified a town.
No conscience whatsoever. Zero.
Born in Denmark, Thor Nis Christensen was brought to the U.S. by his parents at the age of 5. Although a bright student in high school, Christensen later lost interest in his studies and dropped out to work at a gas station. Around this time, he began harboring despicable thoughts, which he then made a reality after stealing a pistol from a friend. He was responsible for the deaths of 4 women, but his murderous spree came to an end when his intended 5th victim survived the ordeal and led the police to him months later.
This guy thinks what he did was all right.
While serving a life sentence at Folsom State Prison, Christensen was wounded in the exercise yard by an unidentified prisoner and later succumbed to his injuries. Roger Kibbe. Dubbed the I-5 Strangler, Roger Kibbe was responsible for the assault and deaths of at least 8 women. His killing spree mostly occurred around Sacramento, California between 1977 and 1987, and he would hunt for his victims along the interstate highway, hence the nickname. He was eventually arrested in 1988 and received an initial prison sentence of 25 years to life.
For each victim, Kibbe responded in a hoarse, raspy voice saying guilty, guilty 6 times.
In the following years, more life sentences were added to this as further evidence of his other murders was discovered. On February 28, 2021, while at the Mule Creek State Prison in California, the I-5 Strangler was strangled to death by his cellmate, Jason Boudreaux, who reportedly did it in retribution for his crimes.
Shock from victims' families tonight, guys. Those who were directly impacted by Roger Kibbe and his serial slayings. But some of these families tonight are saying his death comes 35 years too late.
Robert Pickton.
She was told another inmate with a history of assaults had been in segregation, but was released into Pickton's unit, and that's where the serial killer was speared in the head.
One of the most notorious serial killers in Canadian history, Robert Pickton was convicted of murdering 6 people, although he was charged with 21 and later confessed to 49. He mostly targeted sex workers in downtown Vancouver, picking them up and taking them to his pig farm, where he would kill and dispose of them.
I would wake up in the middle of the night, with a certain face or picture of a girl that I hadn't seen for a while. Or then somebody, the next day would mention to me that we haven't seen so-and-so for a while.
He was sentenced to life in prison and served his time in Quebec's Port Cartier institution. On May 19, 2024, Pickton was reportedly stabbed in the head with a broken broom handle by prisoner Martin Charret. He was rushed to the hospital and put on life support, but he died of his injuries 12 days later.
While Pickton's death may provide peace for some, it also leaves questions unanswered. Were others involved in the murders? Who else did he kill?
Danielle Kamargo Barbosa. Born in Colombia in 1930, Danielle Kamargo Barbosa had a pretty troubling childhood. Prevented from furthering his education by financial constraints, Barbosa eventually fell into a life of crime. He began with petty thefts before escalating into abducting, assaulting, and murdering young girls. Barbosa first went to prison in Colombia, where it is believed that he claimed the lives of more than 80 girls. He escaped from prison and fled to Ecuador, where he continued his despicable actions, later owning up to 72 murders in the country. Barbosa was incarcerated for 16 years, but his sentence was cut short just 5 years in when he was killed by another inmate, who happened to be one of his victim's nephews. Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega. Dubbed El Mataviejas, which translates to the old lady killer in English, Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega rained terror on elderly women in Cantabria, an autonomous community in Spain. In the span of just 8 months, Rodriguez Vega wormed his way into the hearts and homes of several women in the area and took the lives of at least 16 of them. Upon his arrest, Rodriguez Vega confessed to the crimes, but later recanted his confession during his trial. Regardless, he was found guilty and sentenced to 440 years in prison. After serving only a fraction of his sentence, Rodriguez Vega met his end at the hands of 2 inmates at his prison in Salamanca, who brutally attacked him in the common area. Léopold Zion. The crimes of Léopold Zion are pretty tragic, not only because they involve the deaths of 4 people and the assault of many others, but because a large number of them could have been prevented. Zion had been convicted twice of crimes involving assault, but in both cases, he was released early by a parole board. He later succeeded in cutting short the lives of 4 young boys before he was arrested again, this time for good. Zion was convicted of just 1 murder and received the death penalty, although this was later commuted to a life sentence. He was attacked and killed in prison by a fellow inmate, who was acquitted of the crime on the basis of insanity. Leroy Martin. Born and raised in Gaffney, South Carolina, Leroy Martin lived a seemingly normal life. He worked in a textile mill and had a wife and 3 children. Behind that facade, though, was a maniac who rained terror on women in the area and was responsible for the deaths of 4 people.
And I was getting a little eerie feeling as we got deeper into the woods, and finally one of the deputies said, "Here she is," and she was covered up with some brush.
After placing 2 calls himself to a newspaper editor, Martin was spotted close to a crime scene by 2 local residents and was later arrested by police.
You tell the sheriff his boys better catch me real soon or I'm gonna take me another one.
Why don't you just turn yourself in?
Nah, y'all gonna have to hunt me down and shoot me dead like the dog I am.
He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, but only served about 4 years before he was put out of his misery by another inmate at the Central Correctional Institution in South Carolina.
Part of him wanted to be caught. I think another part of him enjoyed the publicity. He would get up every morning and go down to a local cafe and get copies of all the papers and read and talk about the Strangler.
Donald Harvey. While working as a hospital orderly in Ohio and Kentucky, Donald Harvey was responsible for the deaths of a self-proclaimed 87 people.
He was quite bizarre, and on certain levels raised some doubts as to whether or not this guy was reciting some sort of fantasy.
Harvey employed several methods in what he deemed as a mercy killing of his patients, including the use of poisons, suffocation, and withholding essential medications.
They do narrow the list to 10 possible victims. All died of illnesses that could be a cover for poisons like arsenic, a substance found in large quantities at Harvey's apartment.
He pleaded guilty to 37 murders to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. But when you describe yourself as an angel of death, chances are you're bound to get a taste of your own medicine at some point. This came in the form of James Elliott, a fellow inmate at the Toledo Correctional Institution in Ohio, who descended upon Harvey, being familiar with his crimes.
He placed himself in that position. I really don't have much compassion for him. He's, I said back then, and I'd say today, if he ever had gotten out, he would have continued to kill people.
Albert DeSalvo.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated.
1960s Boston, Massachusetts was terrorized by 2 criminals. One dubbed the Boston Strangler, who killed 13 women, and the Green Man, who broke into women's homes and assaulted them.
The grisly headline-grabbing crimes had some comparing the Boston Strangler to Jack the Ripper.
As police launched an investigation into the Green Man's activities, they were pointed towards Albert DeSalvo, whom they arrested and charged with the crimes. While in custody, DeSalvo confessed to also being the Boston Strangler. But due to a lack of physical evidence, he was only tried for the Green Man allegations. DeSalvo was serving a life sentence when he died after being wounded by another inmate in the prison infirmary. Decades later, DNA evidence obtained from one of the victims would prove that DeSalvo was, in fact, the Boston Strangler.
It would appear to definitively determine, in fact, that Albert DeSalvo was the killer of Mary Sullivan.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for killing more than a dozen people. The majority of those murders happened in an apartment near the Marquette campus.
One of the most infamous serial killers to ever walk the earth, Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for the deaths of 17 young men. His spree came to an end in July 1991, when an intended victim escaped from Dahmer's apartment and led the police back to him. He pleaded guilty to all the charges leveled against him and received 15 consecutive life sentences in Wisconsin and an additional one in Ohio. In prison, Dahmer was reportedly unremorseful for his crimes, which reportedly infuriated his fellow inmate Christopher Scarver. resulting in an attack in the prison gym that left Dahmer dead.
To many, including Dahmer's own attorney, it comes as little surprise.
I wasn't shocked because I thought that Jeffrey Dahmer would end up this way.
Scarver also killed Jesse Anderson, another convicted murderer, who just happened to be in the gym at the same time.
At his first court appearance, Scarver entered the courtroom singing.
Rain or shine, sharing your dreams.
Do you feel as though justice was served appropriately in these situations? Let us know in the comments.
I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done.